Welcome to the Talkin Tabletop Podcast, a collection of tabletop thoughts from a growing community of board gamers. And I'm your host, Ryan, from the Mista Rau Gaming YouTube channel. Hello, everybody. It's been a while. It's Ryan here from the Mista Rau Gaming YouTube channel, and I know this episode has been long overdue. A comedy of errors have led us to this point, but hey, perseverance will come through once again, and the Talkin Tabletop Podcast is a go once again to come at you every 2 weeks. Now, what is the Talkin Tabletop Podcast? Well, it is a collection of board gamers, community members, content creators that are all sharing their tabletop thoughts on any particular topic that they want to share with you at any moment in time. Now, that can be a review, that can be some hot takes, that could just be what they've been playing lately, that can just be, any topic that is off the top of their head and coming at you into your earphones this particular week. Now, coming up on this episode, we got a great lineup for us again. We've got DaniCha and the comic book Yeti coming at you, and I believe he has a very special guest on this time around. Brian Chandler from Colourblind Games is back. We've got Alex McKenzie from Meeple and the Moose is back. Danielle Wong and her YouTube channel DaniCha is back once again. And we've got a couple new contributors to the show this time around. We've got Jennifer Oswald and her YouTube channel JenCam Plays Games, and as well as community member Tyler Lance. You may know Tyler from my live streams, hanging out, lurking in that chat room every time that I go live on Tuesday nights. Has got a nice little segment here today as well. All right. Well, I think let's just sit back and relax and let's enjoy the episode this time around. And if you're here for one particular content creator, make sure you're sticking around for all of the content creators because they have all submitted really amazing segments. All right. I will let you folks enjoy the rest of the show, and I will see you at the tail end of it. All right, everybody, cheers and enjoy.
Hey, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our section of the Talkin Tabletop Podcast this week. My name is DaniCha. I am joined here with a good friend of mine and fellow Comic Book Yeti contributor, Jimmy Gasparo. Jimmy, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Dan. Thanks for having me. This is pretty exciting. One of the hosts of the Comic Book Yeti podcast. It's called the Cryptid Creator Corner, and I interview comic book writers and artists. And it's kind of exciting to talk about board games and talk about something else. I very rarely kind of get to be a guest on a podcast because I host one. And we just had a game night last night as we're recording this. So yeah, pretty excited. Thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's safe to say now that you are a gamer. I mean, if we're having a game night where you are playing Great Western Trail, you're a gamer. You're no longer like a newbie or a beginner in the gaming hobby.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of shocked. I mean, I've always liked games, but, Trivial Pursuit was always my favorite. I'm a big Trivial Pursuit fan. I love trivia games. And I played up. Yeah. My 6-year-old Penny and I are obsessed with The Floor on Fox, hosted by Rob Lowe. We just obsessed. But yeah, so I always like trivia style games. And I played a handful of others, but it's odd calling myself like a gamer. I guess maybe because I initially think of that term and think of like video games, and I've certainly played video games, but I don't think I've played any in the past few years. But yeah, I mean, it's shocking to think that now it's been really 7 years that we either had some type of D&D game or another board game, really board games going on. Because I remember that you invited a couple people over. It was, I think, June of like 2017 to play some Game of Thrones game. And I was like, that sounds fun. And then, 7 hours later, like 2 a.m, my wife is texting me like, where are you? Are you kidnapped? Are you hurt? Should I send the police? You said you were going for a game night. It is 2 a.m. But yeah, I just had no idea. I was really somebody that was kind of aware that there were other modern games. Like every once in a while, someone who played a lot would mention like Settlers of Catan or something along those lines. But I just had no idea like the complexity or the different types of games that there are out there. And now it's I'm still surprised when you mention something and I'm like, oh, is that a deck builder or a worker placement? And I'm like, nerd.
You know it, but then you call yourself the nerd right after, like catching yourself. Or our other buddy Kevin will be there to know what we're talking about, but make fun of us for it.
Yeah, 100%. So I guess I would accept that title as a gamer. I mean, I've been to PAX Unplugged twice now, and gotten to check out all the cool games there, and certainly have my favorites. That you've brought over. I mean, I've now hosted my second, or you and I together have kind of hosted our second unmatched tournament. Where we do like a double elimination per 10-person tournament. Yeah. Snake draft, double elimination with cool prizes. Everybody gets an action figure and a graphic novel and a Wawa gift card.
We just have to learn how to beat Achilles because he's wrecking us every year.
Yeah, I know. I think I can do it with Sinbad as long as I remember all of Sinbad's special abilities and don't get so tired that I forget. But yeah, I love when you come over and bring the games, and we even have like games that the kids can play sometimes, like Catastrophe and Spots is now a real big popular one. And last night we played like Great Western Trail for a couple of hours, and it's a lot on the front end, but as soon as you learn what all the different symbols mean, like you kind of figure out a strategy and play from there. And yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I just think it's funny how at the beginning of the game, you're like, all right, I'm going to get rid of a 1 to get some money. And then I'm going to go. And then by the end of the game, like, all right, I'm going to trash this Jersey cow. I'm going to buy a builder and an engineer. And I'm going to go Kansas City.
Yeah. It is funny. Like once and you play enough rounds that you can pick that stuff up by the end. It's just a lot like on the front end. And you see like, jokes or memes about it, like, or TikToks, like folks' eyes glaze over when somebody brings out the rule book. I mean, look, not every game has to be for everybody, but yeah, I enjoy it,
So you had mentioned how you did the Game of Thrones board game night with us. And I think it was only maybe we did one other game night after that. And I just went to everyone. I'm like, let's just do D&D. And I think everyone was pretty on board. We have a good mix of role players or people who are just there to fight monsters, a couple people who are in the mix with both. But real quick, give me your thoughts on just straight up D&D, tabletop RPG D&D.
I mean, I had always heard about D&D. I was familiar with it. I was familiar with the cartoon from the 80s. And by the way, if anybody listening is just because I'm always thinking comic books, David Boer, and I'm going to blank on the name of the artist, but has a D&D Saturday Morning Adventures comic book that's come out in the past few months, which is really good. And it's all those same characters from the 80s cartoon. Yeah, I had always wanted to play, never had an opportunity to. I really enjoy the idea of like creating a character. Again, it's like not being familiar with it. It's a little much at times in terms of like the rules, but with an excellent dungeon master like yourself, we're able to navigate those. And I did a little bit of like acting in high school and college, so the role playing part of it is a lot of fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it's been fun playing with people and seeing how like their approach to gaming is. In our group in particular, Like we have one guy who is like very thoughtful and really digs into like the decisions of that he's going to make. And sometimes it like can slow things down, but we certainly have others in the group who kind of like just rush headlong into nonsense. I mean, usually me, but but it makes for interesting like player dynamics. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun. There have been some like memorable nights within the story and just playing that I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, you're definitely the guy who you likes a little bit of the tactics, you like the role playing, but then there's sometimes you're just like, let's just go in there and kill stuff,
Yeah.
and that kind of is where the game I want to talk about, and the reason I want to talk about D&D and getting to let's just get in there and kill stuff, is D&D Onslaught is a board game version of D&D, mainly just based on the combat. Now, you're not just in charge of one player, you're in charge of a whole party against another player who's in charge of a whole party, and you're on a map, you have a scenario, you got monsters, and you fight it out. And it's very D&D 5e base, where like the terminology is the same, where you have your bonus action, your reactions, your armor class, your hit points, but you kind of leave the role playing to the side, and you have your entire 5-party band, and you go out there, and it can be a fight to the death, or it can be a fight to who gets the most treasure. And I think that speaks well to that aspect of D&D, because you're still on the map, you still have the tactical of like, you can only move this amount of distance, you have to have line of sight, there's heights and everything like that, and your abilities have cooldowns and things like that. So I think it's a really good translation of D&D combat into a board game scenario based style game.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed playing it. I really like all first off, all the game pieces, card art, all of those things are high quality. Everything looks great. And after playing it, and I had a lot of fun playing it, I think it has a lot of like replayability. I can definitely see it's something where there can be expansions to it to add in new players, new abilities, fairly easily, I would think. I thought like the two best uses though, other than just having like a fun time, is if you have played D&D, but maybe you're in between groups or in between storylines, or maybe your whole party can't be there, but you kind of wanted like to stretch those muscles of rolling the dice and the dice. It's like something you can break out and say, hey, we can't get everybody together, because I think there was a TikTok I saw that the greatest villain in D&D is like scheduling.
Adult schedules.
Yeah. And so, but if you have a situation where you can't get the whole party together, so you can't play your normal game, or like if something ends or you're looking for something new, but you have a couple of friends who are into it and know those mechanics, it can be really fun just to kind of like stretch those muscles and fight and roll the dice and do those types of things. The other part of it I think is really good is if folks are maybe new to D&D and interested in it, but maybe they're a little like overwhelmed or unsure of like the role-playing aspect of it. Like it could be a really good introduction to how how like D&D itself works, how those mechanics work. And you can have a really fun time, battling it out, and to start to get a sense of how those in-game mechanics work for the 5th edition. If you eventually want to get to a point where, hey, I really liked this, but I would like to add in some of the, role-playing aspects of it and actually play D&D. So I can see it kind of being like a fun gateway to get more folks to play Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it.
Now, when we played with the core box set with the 2 factions that come with it. Now, I will say that this set was provided to us by WizKids. I had met with Mitch at PAX Unplugged this year. He showed me a bunch of different things, but because of our D&D past, I was really interested in this. And he was running tournaments at PAX, and he's like, yeah, we'll get you something to look at. And he sent me, there is an expansion. I don't know if I showed it to you. It's an expansion that comes with more monsters, another map, more scenarios. But there are also, you can get expansions where you can add more characters to the existing bands and new war bands altogether. And even within then, you can decide, well, these are the 5 I want to play with out of the 6 or whatever. So there's a lot more that they can add to this game. And one of the cool things I really liked was they have this pack. I forget what it's called, but it's basically, how the monsters have the cards. It's basically just a pack of those, and you can use your minis. Like the pack has like a beholder, bugbears, a bullet, so you can bring more monsters in. I'm sure there are people who make their own scenarios up and run people through that. So the replayability, I think, is as big as there is what you're willing to put into the game, because you can use what they have and you can create your own stuff like any DM will do.
Yeah, I also like that, I mean, we, since we started in 2017, in our D&D group, I'm the same character, right? I'm Drake Blackguard. He's a halfling rogue, and and all of that. But without having to create a new character, I could at least get a little bit of a sense of what it's like to fight as a barbarian or a dwarf or whatever it might be, like whether or not it's a different race or class. So I like that aspect of it too, that I can kind of see how the other half fights, so to speak.
The people who get more than one attack.
Yeah, it is.
Or some spells.
Or some spells. Yeah, I don't have any spells. I do get that sneak attack, which I love.
Until you roll a 2.
Yeah, until then. Until it doesn't work, and then I'm like, oh, well, I guess I'm... But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great game. I thought it looked great. All the artwork was fantastic. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to playing it again.
Yeah. And I think it's primarily a 2-player game where one person is in charge of the entire band. But I could see you bringing other people in and maybe splitting, all right, you get 3, I get 2, or we'll collaboratively think what we're going to do. I mean, not ideal, but there's ways you can beef it up so more people can play at one time. And I'm sure there's some variant out there somewhere where people have a map where they can go, all right, just put 3 war bands on there, and winner takes all,
Yeah, but also you have the board and the pieces and the cards, and how the mechanics work. You can adjust just like you would as a DM to your players doing something unexpected. Like you could adjust and have it be like a 4-player game. I could see how you could do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you already gave us one comic book recommendation based off of this theme. So you got any more for us?
Oh man, I got a ton. Yeah. If you like D&D, there's a comic book called Side Quest, which written by Grant Stoy, and the art is by Alea Rossico. It was initially crowdfunded through Kickstarter, issues 1 to 5, but then it was picked up by Scout. And so you can probably find it through Scout's website or at your local comic book shop. That's a really fun one. A couple of one that's a little off the beaten path, but I think still in that kind of fantasy realm, maybe not so much fighting, but some fighting, is Quests Aside, which is, I think, Vault Comics, and it's Brian Shermer and Elaine Gagau, I believe is how you say their last name. But Quest Aside is kind of like D&D meets It's Always Sunny. It's got that D&D element to it, but it's got a kind of it's a kind of funny as well. And then actually, I don't know when people are going to be listening to this, but coming out, I think at the end of March, and I had just interviewed him on my podcast. Gary Maloney is the writer, and the artist is Daniel Romero. Have a new comic book called and it's coming from Mad Cave Studios, which I love Mad Cave Studios stuff, called When the Blood Has Dried. And it's essentially like a kind of that fantasy setting, like Lord of the Rings type setting, but it's like a mix of a Western, a character who's battled their way through, has now retired to a nice little town, and they run a bar, and now trouble from their past has come calling. So it's like a kind of a fantasy Western. And Fantastic title. I just, When the Blood is Dried, like that's just great. And but if you like fantasy type elements, if you're a fan of D&D, I definitely think it's something that you would really enjoy. So yeah, so there's a couple of things for folks who like D&D and are like comics, or want to get into comics, or want to check stuff out. So yeah, check them all out.
Awesome. And give us the name of the podcast again.
Yeah, it's the Cryptid Creator Corner. The name of the website is Comic Book Yeti, and they came up with a very alliterative title. But yeah, anywhere you get your podcast, if you just search for Comic Book Yeti or the Cryptid Creator Corner. I am one of the hosts. The other hosts who kind of started the podcast is Byron O'Neill, and my episodes come out on Tuesdays. Byron's on Fridays. We have a couple of great episodes that recently came out as we're recording this. Pornsack Pinochet, who did Good Asian, has a new comic book called Man's Best Friend. I have sat down with my favorite comic book writer, Tom King. That episode's coming out soon. Byron has an episode coming out with Rom V. And yeah, we got a lot. There's a new Mad Cave Studios comic that's a bit of Steven Spielberg, a bit of Stephen King, called Morning Star. I sat down with the creative team behind that. So yeah, so if you like comic book interview podcasts, please check it out. And yeah, so thanks a lot for having me to talk about games and comics, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And of course, Comic Book Yeti is expanded beyond comic books, which is where I come in to talk about gaming here. So I think we have an article coming out soon, which is going to be Comic Book Yeti staff picks. I believe your staff pick for this article is Love Letter, which is a phenomenal game. Definitely.
I love Love Letter. It's a super fast game. I bought it for a friend of mine, a colleague at work, because they were talking about games, and they, or someone that I don't think has ventured too far into like what I will call like modern gaming. So I got Love Letter, and then I made them play it with me in the office, like at the end of one Friday, and it was a lot of fun. And yeah, I enjoy Love Letter a lot, and that's another one that you can turn into different things. I also have the Star Wars version, Jabba's Palace, which I really like.
We need to find the Batman version, but that might be a costly.
Yeah, I heard it's out there.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Ryan, for giving us some time to talk on the Tabletop Podcast. And maybe if we get some other games down the line, we'll jump back on here and talk some more games.
Yeah, that'd be great. All right. Thanks a lot.
Right. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Greetings, Talkin Tabletop Podcast. Glad to be back on. This is Brian Chandler at Colourblind Games, and I'm going to talk today about a interesting to me topic called Universal Colorblind Code. So the idea, the question here is, as a colorblind player, there's some really good coding done. We often call it double coding. In gaming to tell us different things. For example, the Isle of Cats is a classic example that has different colored cats that not only are they different colors, but they also have different designs. The blue cats have fluffy tails. The red cats have different kind of tails. But once I learn about what the blue cats or red cats look like in Isle of Cats, that doesn't help me know what a red building in Fantastic Factories or the red tulips in Tussie Mussy, even though these games also have double coding. So within a certain game, I had that double coding for that color, red, but learning that one place doesn't help me translate it to another place. So kind of the research question here is, what if we could further overcome this barrier by developing a universal colorblind code? So what if what I learned was red, just like when you're a kid, when you actually learn what red is, you're able to translate that to everything red. I can't do that because my brain and my eyes don't work that way. And so is there a way for us to like double code the world so that whenever I see red, I can see red in any game, not just game by game? So there's been some attempts at this. There's one tool called Color Add. So the word color, American spelling with ADD at the end. And this is a tool I saw many years ago used in Uno. It's most commonly now. A lot of hobby gamers would see it if you've played sea salt and paper. And the idea here is that it has this kind of series of little triangles and slash marks that provide essentially a code. So a triangle in a certain way is always red. I tried this. Frankly, it just didn't work for me. A couple issues that I run into with Colorad is one, that it's not intuitive. So there's nothing about a triangle that says red to me, or a diagonal line that says yellow. And so trying to remember those, frankly, has just been impossible. I've looked at this tool for over a decade and I still don't remember what the different symbols mean. The other big problem for gaming is that it's not rotationally symmetrical. So there's a red triangle, then there's also a blue triangle. Those look the same, if depending on if you're looking. So that, to me, it just doesn't work. And then also Colorad is a proprietary tool, and so both Uno and Sea Salt and Paper actually had to pay money to this company that does the Colorad for that to work. So to me, it's kind of a three strikes situation on Colorad specifically to be able to address this. There's another one I just saw. This is from RAR Games, a recent Kickstarter from last year called Artist Slime, where they introduce a bit of a code where they actually take kind of the three overlapping colors and they put a dot in there to kind of show where that matches up. And they also do some other coding. It's actually really clever. They've got the colors, they've got a letter for that color, so an R on all the red cards. They actually have the full word spelled out as well. So there's actually a lot of good coding. I'm actually pretty sure I could play Artist Slime without any trouble myself. It does only cover the primary and secondary colors, so like the 6 main colors. The English only letters could be an issue in other languages. And then the little Venn diagram they use, that itself isn't colorblind friendly. So I would need to memorize, wait, is the top one yellow or is the right one red? And then trying to make those combinations too. Not the end of the world for me. Again, I think this would be a fantastic version of that coding for me. But trying to look for something that might be a little bit more symbolic. And one place I found that, which is actually getting closer, a gentleman named Peter Vell wrote an essay called Vision and Coding Language back in 2021. And he really thought about this idea of symbology that is connected to the colors themselves. So for example, even though not too dissimilar from the Colorad example, he asked the question, what about red for fire, a circle for yellow, like the sun, and then a squiggly line for blue for water. So you've got these three symbols, kind of a fire type symbol that could even just be maybe a triangle or a hat type label, a circle, and then a line. And this is the way that you could actually identify, again, maybe just the 6 primary colors, but would get us closer to something that was universal, so that anytime I then saw the yellow sun, it would always mean yellow, or the fire would always mean red. This isn't too dissimilar if you've played Magic the Gathering or Pokemon. The colors that they use and the symbology they use for those is symbolic of the actual thing, right? It's a green leaf or it's a blue water droplet. So thinking about that idea too. We've played around with that a little bit. I still think there's something to be said for having an actual color or a symbol for any of the colors. And so red, again, could maybe be fire, or could even be a heart. Maybe yellow would be sun or cheese or a banana. Blue, of course, probably something water-based. Green could be a tree or a leaf, even a frog. Orange, maybe it would be pumpkin or a carrot. Get a little bit harder when you get to things like purple. Maybe it could be grapes or a goblet. Pink could be a pig. Brown maybe is a mountain or an acorn. Gray maybe could be a mouse or a rock. And so you get into some of those areas where, what if we all decided, okay, every time that we use green as the color, somewhere on that green is going to be this leaf icon. Of course, what that runs into is, what if you're in outer space, right? If you're in outer space, there isn't like having a leaf of an outer space themed game probably wouldn't work. So is there something else that we could use or consider in that way? And maybe there is. Again, if you go back to this Peter Vell idea of fire and a circle for the sun and a line for blue that does evoke water, well, maybe that fire could be a rocket ship nose or something if it's a space themed game, or there's just other ways to think about it in ways that might make sense. So anyway, curious what you all think. I still think it's an ongoing thing that's been nagging at me now for years. I think it's something that we could maybe take a look at. I would encourage you to check out my website. I do some more writing on this. There's also a reference to a really interesting Board Game Geek link from Sarah Reed, and I was involved in that one as well. And I think Peter Vell, who I mentioned, might have chimed in there too to talk about this topic. The actual article is called Universal Colorblind Code on my website, colourblindgames.com, and I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Alex, and I write board game reviews over at meepleandthemoose.com, and I'm here to contribute to the Talkin Tabletop Podcast. I think I've mentioned it before, but we recently welcomed a new child into our household. He's our second child, and what's different this time around is that my partner is now self-employed and is not eligible for parental leave, meaning that I am on the precipice of a 35-week leave from my work. To celebrate, I'm refreshing my top 100 games of all time, but in the process of doing so, I was kind of left pondering how I rank games and how to generate a top 100 list. I know a lot of people swear by the Pub Meeple ranking engine method. For those who don't know, Pub Meeple is a website that lets you import your BGG collection and it helps you rank them. It shows you 2 games at a time, and you simply select which of those 2 games you like more. It's a great system, but I've run into a couple of flaws that made me not want to use it this time around. First, I've played too many games. To generate a list via Pub Meeple, it would take around 2,500 comparisons. It took me like 4 days last time. And what's weird is that my feeling about certain matchups would change from day to day depending on my mood. Also, there were also some situations where I just couldn't choose which of the games were the better options. They were just too different. Like trying to choose between Massive Darkness and like Mintworks. Like those are very different games for very different situations, and I just couldn't really tell you which of the 2 I prefer in those moments. Overall, Pub Meeple is a great system, but it's just not for me anymore. Also, side story, I recently had my mom use it to find her top 50 games, as she's only played 50 games total, and it took her like 20 minutes total. Eventually I'll share that list, but not today. What I did instead this time was to revisit all of my games and to give them a ranking from 1 to 10. I more or less followed the BGG standard for user ratings. You know, like a 10 out of 10 game is outstanding, always want to play, and expect this will never change. A 7 out of 10 is a good game, usually willing to play, and a 3 out of 10 is a I likely won't play this again, although I could be convinced. You get the idea. Some other reviewers have their own rating scales, like Blue Peg Pink Peg have a 0 to 6 rating for all their games, where 0 is a terrible game and 6 is a collection essential. I've seen everything from a binary thumbs up, thumbs down to 5 stars to a 100-point rubric system where each part of a game gets a score and the final rating is the sum of those scores. If you've read any of my reviews before, you may have noticed that my rating for a game is absent from the review, and this is mostly because I feel like putting a number rating on a review doesn't tell the whole story. A game for me might be a 10 out of 10, but it's a real-time game, which automatically makes it a thumbs down for somebody else. I try to make my games reviews a more nuanced discussion where I talk about what I like and dislike in a game, and hopefully give you enough of my opinions to make an informed decision whether it's a game you might like to play as well. But I've strayed off topic here. I went through all the games I played and refreshed their ratings, and then I sorted the games by their ratings, with 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. Then within each number, I sorted each game based on the ones I liked the best. Not all 10s are created equal, you know. The end result was a list of over 100 games, roughly in the order that I prefer to play them. I'll start posting my top 100 in early March, so look forward to it on my blog then. One thing that quite surprised me about my top 100 games was that there were a significant number of games that I ranked an 8 out of 10 that didn't even make it into my top 100. We live in an age where a game can be a very good game that I like to play. I'd probably suggest it and would never turn down a game and still not make it into my top 100. Too many great games is a good problem to have. I love reading top 100 lists, and I love reading top 10 lists, and I'm always interested in people's methodology for building those lists. So if you have an interesting way that you choose to build lists, please let me know. And that's all from me this week. If you'd like to read my board game reviews, you can find them over at meepleandthemoose.com. If you'd like to get in touch with me, my email is meepleandthemoose@gmail.com, and I'm most active on Blue Sky and the Nerd Shelves Discord server. Thanks for listening, and have a happy day.
Hey everyone, Danielle here. I am back on the Talkin Tabletop Podcast. Very happy to be here. And in case you're not familiar with who I am, I run the YouTube channel DaniCha. I focus mostly on solo board games. I do unboxings, playthroughs, and rarely live streams. So I figured, being that this is the beginning of April, I'd talk about some of my top played games in March. And the one that tops the list right now is Star Wars Unlimited, Spark of Rebellion. So this is a TCG that I've been playing on mostly webcam these days. And so this has been a very fun dueling type game that I've been playing with people on a Discord server. This game is good for 2 to 4 players, but it is best for 2. According to Board Game Geek. And I say that also because there's a format called Twin Suns that most people would play up to 4 players with. I'm mostly focusing on the 2-player mode, and that has been a ton of fun. Building the decks can be challenging because there's so many different cards, so many different combos you want to pull off, and really if you're not playing competitively, the replayability of this game with all the different cards available is really unlimited, which kind of makes sense with the name of this overall TCG, Star Wars Unlimited. But yeah, I won't get too in depth on how the gameplay works, but basically you're building a deck with a leader and a base, and each of those cards have aspects, and those aspects would mean that you can put cards that belong to those aspects into your deck. And if you happen to put cards that are outside of those aspects, you just have to pay an extra, there's a penalty, I guess, and requires you to pay extra resources to play that card. And then when you play your cards, there are space units and ground units and events and upgrades. So with your units, you'll place space units on one side of your playmat, and then you'll place your ground units on another side of the playmat. And with your opponent, you can only attack space units with space units and ground units with ground units. Although, of course, there's always exceptions to the rule due to card abilities, but, for the most part, you really can only attack similar units with the same type. So the point of the game is to get your opponent's base health down to 0, and your base health could vary. Most of the time the default is 30, but sometimes there are special, more rarer bases available where the base health is 25. Of course, this could vary as sets come out, but currently those are the 2 base health values right now. What's cool about your leader unit is that there's an ability you can play throughout the game. Typically it's an action, and also, you can utilize that same leader card as a unit, meaning you could bring out your unit, your leader as a unit at some point in the game, and they could fight for you. But you can only do that once per game, because that is considered an epic action. So, I said I wouldn't get into too many details, so I'll probably end my little discussion on Star Wars Unlimited there and move on to After the Virus. So After the Virus is a deck building game, and it shines really as solo. I've been playing it solo many times since I got it, and the overall gameplay is very simple. You're trying to survive waves of zombies, and so you can imagine that it's a pretty brutal game, and I find it frustrating at times, but for the most part it's entertaining. The games are quick enough so that I could just restart and try again. So it comes with a bunch of different solo campaigns, which I've had success in beating, I think 3 of them so far. And I like that the campaigns also have different versions of them. So like there's 1A, 1B, 1C, and each of those are, varied in length depending on the setup or the rules. So they make it either harder or a little bit easier so that you could get a game of it more quickly than you would if you wanted a longer version of the game. So I really like that aspect. They really thought about, the player there, because, you don't always have 90 minutes to play a solo game. You might just have the 30 minutes. So I really appreciate that they included all that. I also really like the fact that there's 4 different characters that you can play in the base game. So I'm only talking about the base game. There are, I think there's 1 expansion so far. I have to check, but I only have the base game, and I think that's really more than enough for me right now. I'm enjoying it so far, and yeah, that is After the Virus. So next I'll be talking about a game that I've only played on Board Game Arena, and this one is called Captain Flip. So this one is a very fun kind of push your luck tile placement game. You're trying to get more points than your opponent by the end of the game, and overall, I find the gameplay to be just very pleasant. It's very easy. Board Game Geek has it weighted at 1.13 out of 5, so I think it's very family friendly. And if this were in my possession, I guess in my physical collection, I think I wouldn't have any issues bringing this out for a family game night. What's cool about this game is that it comes with, I think, 4 different boards, so there's some replayability there. But overall, I think this is just a very competitive game, and I am not one to really play competitive games in person, only because I don't really have too many people to play with. But when you're playing on Board Game Arena, there's really no shortage on who you can play with, so definitely been enjoying Captain Flip. Another Board Game Arena game I've been playing is Pocket Cats, and that's one that came out this year actually. So I've been having a lot of fun with this one. It is a 2-player only game. And this one, you're trying to, I guess, get as many points as you can, just like Captain Flip. And it's very strategic, this one. So you're flipping tiles as you play your turn. And then you can move these tiles and swap them with another tile that's already flipped up. So it's been a very interesting game to learn to play. I think it's currently in beta, if I remember correctly. But if you haven't already checked it out, definitely do. This is a very easy game to pick up, and the art is very cute too. So if you like cats, this is one that you have to try. And then the last one is another Board Game Arena game called Grumblestone, and the release date for this one is also 2024. So this one is a dice rolling game, and I love dice rolling games if you know anything about me. So basically you're rolling dice, and then you're using your dice kind of like coordinates to figure out which columns and rows you're going to activate in your board. And your columns and rows are filled with polyominoes that give you certain power-ups. It could be attacks, it could be shields, it could be money that you spend to buy more polyominoes to place on your board. So there's a lot of competition here, because the polyominoes that you want to buy might not be available later because it might be bought by your opponent. This is a 1 to 4 player game, but I mostly just play it 2-player because I kind of like the head-to-head aspect of it. But yeah, overall, this is a very fun dice rolling game. It really could go either way when you play this one because of the asymmetric, they call them golems. Basically, you have characters that have unique starting grid, health, and wealth, and certain powers and superpowers that you can unlock if you were to fill your board with polyominoes in a column and a row. So those are just some games that I have been playing a lot of in March, and I anticipate playing more of these in April, but I do have some games that I think will rise quickly to the top. And one mention of a game that I think will rise quickly to the top in April is Imperial Settlers Empires of the North, which is a game I recently got, and I am really enjoying it. It's an older game, but it is one that I have been enjoying because there's somewhat of a worker placement aspect, engine building, and those are 2 mechanics I really like. No dice rolling, but that's okay. But yeah, I also just purchased the Japanese Islands expansion for that game, so I'm excited to see what those clan decks look like. So if you know anything about the game, you choose a clan, and then you use your deck to hopefully get enough victory points at the end of the game. And you're managing resources, you're managing locations, and you're also visiting islands with your ships. So there's a lot going on in that game, but really it's a very straightforward type of game, and so far I'm really enjoying it. All right, well, I think I'll end my little segment here. As always, I hope you've all been doing well and enjoying the first 3 months of the year. I would love to hear more about what you are playing, what games you are looking forward to getting this year. There's a lot of new cool releases coming out this year, so I'm also excited to see what this year has in store for board gamers like me. All right, thank you for listening. Talk to you next time. Bye.
Hi, I'm JenCam, and my channel is JenCam Plays Board Games here on YouTube. Before I get started, I just want to say how excited I am to be here on Talkin Tabletop and want to thank Brian for having me here on the podcast. Recently, I was part of a conversation with a few other content creators, and the topic came up about how we got into content creation or the board gaming space in general, and it really made me think about what I wanted to talk to you about as my segment today. And I thought that maybe I should take this time to introduce myself to all and share with you how I got into the hobby, how I got into content creation, and why it is important to me. Like a lot of people in the hobby, I grew up playing the classics. You know which games I'm talking about, so we can go ahead and skip that part and go straight to 2020. Unlike a lot of people, I was not stuck at home. I was working in healthcare at the time. My now husband was the kitchen manager of a local restaurant where he quickly became the only member of the kitchen staff that was not laid off. So this meant that my, then fifth grader was the only one in the household that was at home 24/7. And so like any other A-type, highly socialized problem solver type personality I am, I decided that our family needed to find ways to spend more time together. And so, of course, I decided that we as a family should start playing board games. This was also right around the time that I discovered Will Wheaton's tabletop show on Geek and Sundry on YouTube. I quickly saw how much fun everybody that was on the show was having at the table, and how different board games are from what I remembered or experienced as a child. So yeah, that's really pretty much how I came up with this grand plan that the three of us would start playing board games together and just go like full tilt on perfect TV family. I started watching so much board game content on YouTube. It was crazy. I bought so many games. I watched so many reviews. If people were talking about it and everybody loved it, I'm like, yeah, we gotta try that one. I'm talking about this time period where so many people were talking about this game, and it's the best game. It's the best game ever. And I'm like, yes, I gotta try it. With virtually no board gaming experience whatsoever, I bought Gloomhaven. So since I was far more into board games than my family, and not to say that my family didn't play, but I wanted to play more than they did. So I started playing games solo. The biggest problem I had though was I had so little guidance. Like outside of the reviews I was finding, which, you know, once Gloomhaven came, I realized maybe I shouldn't just buy every game that people say is good. And so I wanted to find solo board game content that had playthroughs. However, at the time, there just weren't that many solo board game playthroughs. So once I got further into the hobby, and I was kind of like, you know, I've been playing for a while, but it's fun, but it's kind of lonely. And I'm like, you know, maybe I will start doing content. And so at first I thought I would do YouTube, because at that point I still just didn't feel like there were that many people doing games solo. still lots of two-handed, or obviously like One Stop Co-op Shop was doing like a lot of co-op games, things like that. But I also really enjoyed Euros. And for Euros, there just weren't that many solo players. So I decided I wanted to get into content creation to help fill in that hole a little. And then I discovered Twitch and live streaming. And I'm just like, this is so cool. I'm like, and I went to my husband, who I'm sure, I mean, we weren't even married yet. And I'm surprised this man married me, given how just crazy this escalated in such a short period of time. But I'm like, you know what? I think I want to do Twitch instead. I want to do live streams. I want to play solo with chat being there, because that way, even if I am playing a game by myself, you're not really by yourself. I would still have that community. I'd still have that connection. And so I went into Twitch really 2 years into my board gaming hobby. I absolutely loved streaming on Twitch. I had no idea that the board gaming community was going to be so kind and welcoming, and I just made so many friends, whether they're other content creators or other or viewers or just other fans in board gaming. That's how I learned about board gaming conventions. The first one I ever went to was here in Michigan. It's called NerdFest. That was last year, so January of 2023. And I found out about it hanging out in Jamie Dagger's Twitch stream. She was talking about going to Wixom, and I'm like, oh, Wixom, Michigan? And she's like, yeah. So sure enough, it was like a week or two later, and I went to my first convention completely by myself. I was so nervous because, again, I'm not used to playing board games with other people. I usually play by myself. And I went to 5 different conventions last year. I went from 0 to 5. Because of this hobby, I have met so many amazing people that I otherwise would have never known or been able to call my friends. It really is absolutely amazing. And it's so cool to see, what other people are playing, what kind of games they're into, discovering new types of games. Maybe you're playing a game that you would have never played except for you're at this convention, and now you're sitting with this table and they're like, hey, we're going to play this next. Do you want to learn it? It's so cool, and so much more than I thought it was going to be when I got started. And while I love the interactiveness of Twitch, YouTube has now given me this opportunity to do a lot of things that I would not have done on Twitch. Now I'm loving this like freedom of kind of being able to stream, I shouldn't say stream, record whatever I want, when I want, and play all these games that it's kind of like the possibilities feel like they're endless. So I think I'm also getting a little off topic. So let's kind of go back to what kind of all this meant for me, my family. And one of the things that was that we went to Origins last year. My husband and my son came with me. And even though, again, they're not heavy board gamers, we still played a lot of games. I think we played more games at like that over that 3 or 4 days that we were in Columbus than we played the entire year together. And Kiddo enjoyed it so much that he even asked to come with me to Gen Con. I'm not going to lie, I had no idea what Gen Con was going to be like. That was absolutely wild, especially with the Lorcana situation. That was crazy. We're super glad we went. We're hoping to be able to go again this year. And now my family and I are really trying to reserve time at far more often to be able to play, games together. And so I'm now really starting to be able to experience what it's like to have a gaming group. I'm almost 4 years in. I'm 3.5 to 4 years in, and I'm finally getting a game group. That's kind of wild. But while board gaming in itself is such a wonderful experience, honestly, the best part of this hobby is the community. And if it wasn't for how welcoming and helpful this community has been, to me, especially in the beginning. I'm not sure I would have, gotten this deep into the hobby. Honestly, I just want to say to all of you just how thankful I am for all of you that are listening, have chatted with me, laughed with me, but more than anything, have allowed me to share this wonderful, wonderful hobby with you.
Hey everyone, it's Tyler Lance here. First time on the Talking Tabletops podcast, but a frequent visitor of Mista Rau's streams, the Tabletop Express Discord, as well as Tabletop Express's Call Aboard. Hopping in here as we're going to be talking about multiplayer games with great solo modes today. I absolutely love playing games solo, whether it's a multiplayer game that has a solo mode or a game that is designed, built to specifically be played solo. So there are a lot of games out there that try to have a good solo mode built into it. Sometimes they don't work out though, and it may be tough for others to follow. So wanted to give a list of just 3 games and one quick honorable mention of games that may be great for you to play, not only multiplayer with your group, your game night, and get it to the table then, but if it's a night not able to get out and there's other occurrences that are preventing the group from being able to meet, being able to play that game solo that you really enjoy can be a nice way to continue to learn the game and learn how to maybe even teach it a little better. So a couple different games here, but we'll start out with the honorable mention, and this is just a broader honorable mention in a game publisher in Stonemaier Games. Stonemaier Games uses Automa Factory for most, if not all, of their solo modes in their games, and Automa Factory is phenomenal. They make it so easy to understand, whether it's the rules, the cards that you are utilizing to show the actions, or just playing the game as a whole solo. So when you're going through, Automa Factory gives these cards. Red Rising is one of my favorite solos. I've played Wormspan solo. Heard a lot of great things about Scythe as a solo play. So there's a lot of different wings or different Stonemaier games that have that great Automa Factory implementation into it that helps the user really have a great solo experience. So if you're looking for a publisher that is going to provide that best solo experience, I would definitely check out Stonemaier Games to start. But those aren't the games I'm going to mention. The first game I'm going to mention is Spirit Island. Spirit Island is one of those, I may be cheating with this one as it's really great solo. And I'm not the only one that thinks that as well. So Spirit Island is a cooperative game where you're playing as a spirit trying to get these invaders off of the island and really meets the requirements of the win depending on where you're at within your level of terror in the game. And it's very simple to play, but there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. So the big difference between whether you're playing solo or multiplayer in Spirit Island is the amount of different island pieces that are out on the board, which can make it more difficult because you're pushing different explorers, different towns and villages to different locations. So that can make it more difficult as a multiplayer game, whereas in a solo game, you're just playing with one specific island piece and you're trying to meet those requirements that you would in any player counts that you would be playing at. Spirit Island, such a good game. So many diverse different spirits that you can play as, so there is a lot of replayability with it, but it is also really fun to play with others. So definitely keep an eye on Spirit Island. There's a lot of good different expansions for it as well. If you really, really enjoy the game, that you can take a look at. So number 1 is Spirit Island. Number 2 is Dune Imperium. This is the first board game that I've ever bought. I'm newer to the hobby. I've been in it about 3 years now. So I'm a little newer and newish to as I'm diving further deeper into the board game hobby itself. Dune Imperium, though, is obviously a very highly ranked game. And the abilities that it provides in a multiplayer experience is above and beyond. Adding in expansions is very good as well. Some of them may not be favorites for others, but they do add their own kind of little twist for each expansion that you bring in. Now, in a solo experience with Dune Imperium, you're still having 2 other people that you are going against, as there's 2 bots. And the way that the solo experience is set up is through a card system that you flip the card, and then the bot will go to that location if it is open. If it's not open, then you flip the next card and you go until they can place their agent on that location. Now, you're playing your turns normally, and the bot is playing out their turns as well, with those cards being flipped until their agents are all out on the board. It's very simple, very little management, even though I'm not the biggest fan of controlling 2 different bots in a solo experience. They still make it very manageable and accessible for those that don't want a lot of upkeep within that solo experience and still want to have the full Dune Imperium challenge that the game does bring. And the bots do not make it really easy at all. So it is still a very challenging game to play solo. So if you're looking at it, the game does recommend specific factions to start with when you're playing the Dune Imperium solo mode. I would definitely follow that, and it's a good way to get into it, and then you can make that challenge a little more as you're progressing through your solo plays of Dune Imperium. So number 2 is Dune Imperium. The third game is The White Castle, and this one is a newer one out by DeVere Games, and it's a challenging solo game. It's one of those, if you look at the box, you take the rules that come with the box in solo mode, it is a very difficult game to win if you're playing it solo. But fortunately for those that want to get an intro to the solo experience and maybe not as big of a challenge right away that you want to dive into with the solo experience, there's a solo mode created by the community for the White Castle that is a really good one and has received a lot of positive feedback from others that have played it. So White Castle is a dice placement game where you only get 9 turns. There's not a lot of wiggle room within this game, but the rewarding part is getting those combos and being able to you place 1 die in a spot, but you're getting 3-4 different actions because of what the capability is for that dice placement location. And it's so it gives you that extra oomph to think through where you're going to put the die, how you can build up to complete that action, but also do it efficiently. So White Castle is one of my favorite solo experiences that can be played well multiplayer. I've played it at 2, 3, and 4 different player counts, as well as obviously solo, and I can't say there was a bad experience at any player counts. So something that is not only great solo, but it is also great multiplayer too. So a valuable game to have a part of your collection if you enjoy the dice placement of it, and there's a little bit of randomness as well, but it is a very fun game to play with. So I'd like to hear what you have to say for some great multiplayer games that you have played in the past that you think should also be added to this list, as there's so many out there. I could go on forever and add on to this list, but we'll keep it at 3 games, and I want to hear more from you. So we'll send it back to Ryan.
Thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your very busy schedules for submitting segments to the Talking Tabletop Podcast. And once again, welcome Tyler and Jen for your new contributions to the show. It means the world to me that we are ever growing this community of board gamers and that you're all willing to share your tabletop thoughts. Once again, I'm Ryan from the Mista Rau Gaming YouTube channel, and at the time of this recording, I am celebrating 2 years on my YouTube journey, and I can't believe that it's already gotten to this point. I must say, content creation has taken a whole new form over the past few years. Reflecting back on the show here, it initially started off as Mr. Rau's Rants and Reviews, where I would rant about particular topics and do board game reviews. And then I slowly changed that because I realized that I really didn't actually like complaining about things. I don't know why I thought about it in the first place. And reviews are such a fickle at times. So I decided but what part of the board gaming hobby do I really, really enjoy? It's the actually playing of the games and sharing that experience with everybody. So that is why now on the channel, you will now see almost 100%, slowly changing every now and then, but playthroughs of games. And that is how I do my live streams as well. And of course, I've also shifted lots to the live stream format and grown a nice community of board gamers through that avenue. And only because live streaming requires very little editing, and people are a lot more forgiving of you if you make mistakes while you're playing games actually live, because that is the actual experience of playing a game right then and there. I'm looking up rules in the rule books, asking the chat about everything, just kind of having a good old time, just like board games are. So thank you once again, everybody, for helping me along. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We are across the 600 threshold, which is amazing. Never thought in a million years I'd be doing this at that point. But hey, we are here. We are going strong. So I thought I'd take my last little bit here just to kind of reflect on the content creation process. And I had a chance to attend Dice Tower West in lovely Las Vegas in the month of March. And part of that is that I did get to sit on a panel, not sit on the panel, but attend a panel discussion from Monique and Naveen from Before You Play Games, Paula Deming from Things Get Dicey, and Dan King, the Game Boy geek himself, talking about just, content creation and what people have questions and what are their responses to it. And it really, really was an awesome thing because it really set in a tone, and a lot of things resonated with me, mainly because why am I doing content creation? It's because I actually enjoy doing it. At times, for the better part, it doesn't feel like work because I am enjoying it so much, and it's something that I really want to do, especially the video aspect of it. Is I'm finding my zen place whenever I'm doing things like editing this podcast and talking about this podcast with other people. So I do it because I really, really enjoy it. Am I in it for the subs? Am I in it for the fandom and whatnot? Am I in it for the review copies and everything like that? Like those are really nice and interesting things that can happen along the way, but it's not the sole purpose. I do it because I love to do this stuff. And I love the community of gamers that is growing kind of around me, and through the Tabletop Express Discord channel, and through my avenues like my Instagram account now that is starting to gain a little bit of traction with a bunch of community of gamers in there. So yeah, I just do it because I really, really, really like it. And at times, yeah, it may feel like it's a little bit of work, but overall, it doesn't feel like work because I'm having a lot of fun doing it. I'm picking the games that I want to play, I want to showcase. I'm not on a contract or schedule with anybody. I tried the schedule process before that. I kiboshed that one almost right away because it started feeling like work. And when things start feeling like work, you should really stop doing it, especially if this is a hobby for you. And people may have noticed that I do take breaks every now and then in the content, and that's because, this is still just a hobby, and I just want to just have as much fun with it. I am just getting back from a little holiday with my family. I had some content planned, but, things happen, and that's the thing. Things happen, and I just kind of roll with the punches, and that is just the way that it's going to work out. Now, over the course of the content creation process, I have made some partnerships. I have made some friends along the way, and I'm so glad that people are coming to me and part of my channel and being a part of my community, and it just is so overwhelming with positive interactions, and that is why we are board gamers. We are here for those positive interactions. And that is why I love doing this channel and now doing this podcast, which is going to come back on this bi-weekly format. I'm, kicking off the 2-year anniversary in style here with this brand new segment of the podcast. And I started rambling there, but that's what I do. Make sure that you are liking the videos that I'm releasing on my channel and joining me for my live streams on Tuesdays. And of course, interact with me now on my Instagram account. It started to really grow and take off for the past little bit. So follow my gaming ventures over on there. And I'm also on Threads and Blue Sky, but not as much as I am on Instagram nowadays. And and I really hope to see you in the chats of my live streams and seeing you around on the channel. I guess we will see you all in about 2 weeks' time. Cheers, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. Take care now.